before me.
Before you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but April starts?
No. You started.
Okay. When are we ready?
It's 2 o'clock now.
What do we do? Start at 2?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? So thank you for coming to the Sharon Church Health Ministries Combating Diabetes with Dr. Wes Youngberg. Dave's going to give you more, but I just want to kind of from a housekeeping standpoint, I have passed out a number of cards, 3x5 cards. If you have any questions about the things that you hear on the program, write them down on a card. And at the end of the presentation, just move those cards toward the center aisle and I'll collect them. And also, I've passed out pins. So if anyone doesn't have a card and they want one, or they don't have a pin and they want one, raise your hand, and I'll come over to you. Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So glad to have you here today on a very important topic on diabetes. So glad you're here. And before we get started, I read these before. Some of the statistics there are really mind-boggling, that there's 98 million people right now with prediabetes, and 80% of them don't know they're prediabetes. So they're heading that direction and don't have a clue that they're going that direction. Globally, the prediabetics are 298 million globally. Diabetes globally, 422 million people have diabetes globally. And the cost to America every year is $412 billion. So if you could reduce that a little bit, if you could take less medicine, and like you'll hear here, to reverse diabetes, which is possible with type 2 diabetes. What savings could we have here? A lot of money saved. So let's bow our heads for prayer and we'll get started. Lord, thank you so much for this information. Help us to learn from this and help us to have the ability to be healthy. In Jesus' name, amen.
Just a little housekeeping. Let me get this to work. Of course. Okay, this presentation is for information only and educational purposes. It is not meant to diagnose or substitute your own medical provider's care. So if, this is for information and education, okay? So the presentation today, we're very fortunate to have Dr. Wes Youngberg record this for us. Dr. Wes Youngberg is a doctor of public health, and he's a fellow of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and he's certified as a nutrition specialist. He has his doctorate in preventive care, and he's a graduate and a former professor of Loma Linda University. Currently, he is practicing in Temecula, California, which is near San Diego, California. Dr. Youngberg has 35 years of experience in lifestyle medicine. And I'm so pleased to present Dr. Youngberg as our speaker today in this pre-recorded video. Thank you so much.
I failed to mention that after the video, my wife has slaved weeks making energy balls out there, and they are fantastic. Anyway, just to let you know. All right, let's start here.
It is good for me to be with you today. In fact, I feel pretty much at home, not only in the fact that I'm in my office, but I actually spend most of my day on Zoom with patients all around the country. So it is my pleasure to be with you today. I actually love it when church organizations, other organizations, not only are meeting the needs of its own members, but are actually opening the doors to the community in general to share in learning ways to optimize and improve their health. And so I'm really glad to share this experience with you at the Sharon Seventh Adventist Church. I actually have a soft spot in my heart for North Carolina. I spent two of my best years growing up in high school in North Carolina, attending Mount Pisgah Academy near Asheville. My parents had actually been on vacation from Michigan, where they were both college professors in Bering Springs, Michigan, and they were looking for property to buy near Brevard, North Carolina, and we ended up getting 12 acres of land in the mountains near Brevard, and I get to go back there a couple times a year and do some work, and we have a garden, and of course have to clear timber oftentimes, and so I actually live in North Carolina part of the time, but I actually had the opportunity to go to high school there at Mount Pisgah Academy, and while there, not only did I meet some wonderful lifelong friends that I made there in North Carolina, but one of our fun experiences was when a couple of my buddies who actually lived in Asheville and attended our Christian boarding school, they said, "Hey Wes, you want to just join our team? We're gonna go compete in the Southern Star Classic ski, giant slalom ski race at Beech Mountain." And I wasn't really a good skier. I had my own set of skis with me, and that's pretty much what qualified me to be the fifth member of their ski team. They were much better skiers than I was. So we just went, we just got it, we got it approved by our principal, and we were able to represent our little Christian school that had maybe 400 students total. And, we showed up at Beech Mountain, and there was these huge buses with, huge teams of skiers from different big high schools from all over the southern states. And, it was a little intimidating. They were all decked out in their gear, and, we were in jeans and, sweatshirts. And, to make a long story short, we won the race, the high school division, giant slalom, and totally unexpected. I certainly didn't expect to win. I was just happy to be there, right? And so that was back in 1977 or 78 when we were in high school, and every once in a while when we get together for homecoming, we reminisce the good old days. That was over 45 years ago. So I have a lot of roots in North Carolina, and I look forward to maybe someday visiting you in person. But today our topic has to do with, can we actually reverse diabetes? And in order to reverse diabetes, we first need to know how to prevent it from happening. But I've spent the last 35 years in the practice of lifestyle medicine, actually helping people reverse chronic diseases. And I see diabetes as one of the key chronic diseases that that represents the potential for reversal. Okay, literally, the vast majority of people who have type 2 diabetes right now have the potential to reverse their diabetes. And I'm going to demonstrate that with several case studies today and give you some pointers on how you could get started on this journey to literally reverse your diabetes or maybe your pre-diabetes. Now, if you're thinking that, well, I don't have pre-diabetes, well, the reality is that if you're the average adult, you probably already have at least pre-diabetes. In fact, if you're over age 30, you probably have pre-diabetes or worse. If you're between ages 40 and 59, at least 1 out of 2 of you already have pre-diabetes. If you're between the ages of 60 and 74, at least 2 out of 3 of you have pre-diabetes. And if you're 75 years or older, at least 3 out of 4 of you already have pre-diabetes, and 1 out of 3 of you already has full-blown diabetes. So pre-diabetes and diabetes is the norm. It is not the exception. Most people have a problem with blood sugars, and so this is a perfect discussion to have because it's reversible the vast majority of the time. Now, if you have type 1 diabetes, which represents maybe 5% of individuals with diabetes, that is a type of diabetes where the pancreas was attacked by a toxin or a virus, usually during childhood or the teenage years, but it can happen later on in life as well, that damages the pancreas's ability to make insulin so much that now you have to take insulin. So a type 1 diabetic is in a different situation as the typical, type 2 diabetic, but even a type 1 diabetic can dramatically improve their health with the same principles that we use to reverse type 2 diabetes. In fact, if you've had type 1 diabetes for 10 or more years, chances are that you also have the same elements of type 2 diabetes. So even though we don't normally refer to it like that in medicine, the reality is that the underlying metabolic process that causes type 2 diabetes is oftentimes also present in adults who have type 1 diabetes. And so if you reverse that part as a type 1 diabetic, it dramatically improves your health and it lessens your risk of the complications that can occur with any type of diabetes. So let's just dive in here. I have an hour with you today to share with you insights I have gleaned over the last 35 years of helping people prevent and reverse diabetes and many other conditions. And by the way, I actually spend a significant amount of my clinical time with patients helping individuals who want to prevent or manage or even reverse aspects of cognitive decline, whether they have mild cognitive impairment or early forms of Alzheimer's or even advanced forms of Alzheimer's. What is interesting is Alzheimer's is being referred to now as type 3 diabetes or insulin resistance of the brain. Likewise, you could say that type 2 diabetes or even pre-diabetes is a form of Alzheimer's of the pancreas. I'll explain more of that in a little bit. But what I want to do now is I'm going to go ahead and share screen. And I'm going to start the PowerPoint presentation on today's topic. So I've actually called this presentation Strategies to Reverse Diabetes and to Optimize Immune Function. Now, I'm going to get into this in a minute, but I've learned is over the last 3 years of the pandemic, if there's anything that I've learned clinically is that is critical to keep your immune system strong. Because if you don't keep your immune system strong, any disease you have, whether it's diabetes or Alzheimer's or heart disease or whatever it might be, it's going to get worse really quick. Okay, and so we know that individuals who get an infection of any kind, which means the immune system at that point in time was not strong enough to prevent the infection, right? So if you get an infection of any kind and it starts getting bad, you have symptoms of that infection, like a respiratory infection or a urinary tract infection or really any kind of infection, that's going to drive your blood sugars very high. If you have prediabetes, and especially if you have diabetes, any infection will drive your blood sugars very high. If you've been checking your blood sugars before, during, and after infections, you will know that an infection can easily make your blood sugars go up 100 or more points higher than they normally would for that situation. So that's why I am now emphasizing anytime I deal with diabetes, I'm always working on helping the individual with diabetes or prediabetes understand this principle that we have to optimize the immune system. Now, here's a quick overview of the presentation. First of all, as I already pointed out, the majority of us Americans are either pre-diabetic or diabetic. Okay, and this majority, the majority of us who have prediabetes or diabetes, can actually reverse it. And this is at any age, and I'm going to prove that to you with one of the case studies I'm share. I'm going to share with you the two most important steps in addressing the cause of diabetes. In other words, what are the first two steps that we need to take in order to begin to reverse this process? What are the most effective times to eat and to exercise? All right, that might be interesting to you. And then how infections promote diabetes by inducing this metabolic and immune dysregulation. And then finally focusing on if they have other health concerns like heart disease or whatever it might be, that many times these conditions can be reversed or dramatically improved. All right. So it's important to understand that when we're dealing with diabetes or pre-diabetes, they are diagnosed based on one criteria alone, and that is how high the blood sugars are under different scenarios. But high blood sugars are only the tip of the iceberg. There is a huge metabolic mess that underlies the elevated blood sugars. And that's why we need to be much more cognizant of even mildly elevated blood sugars and other tests that give us clues as to, what might be at risk long term. So we need to make sure that we're digging a little bit deeper and understanding the underlying causes of prediabetes and diabetes, treating them early and not just waiting for our blood sugars to be elevated. Back in 1997, I actually spent 14 years on the island of Guam and the surrounding islands of Micronesia in the Western Pacific, practicing lifestyle medicine at the Guam Seventh Adventist Clinic. It's actually a large medical center there, and spending time traveling to the different islands, educating the doctors and the populations about how they could actually prevent and reverse diabetes. And at the time, the governor of Guam called for a task force for the prevention of diabetes on Guam. This was at a time when the death rate, the mortality rate associated with diabetes on the island of Guam was 5 times higher than on the mainland United States. And it was high here, but it was really high in Guam. And so I had the privilege to co-chair that task force for the governor, along with Dr. Charles Brinegar, who who had been the medical director of the Diabetes Treatment Center at Loma Linda University for several decades already. And I remember talking with Dr. Brenner, going to say, how can we prevent the condition when the current diagnostic criteria used to establish, to determine if somebody had diabetes, was occurring later than the beginning of complications? In other words, how can you prevent a complication when you don't even know you have the disease? And so that's when we came up with the 5 stages of high blood sugar, working up to diabetes. Okay, and so the key to understand here is that diabetes is not the beginning of high blood sugars. Diabetes is stage 5 high blood sugars. Okay, and pre-diabetes is not even the beginning of high blood sugars. It's stage 3 high blood sugar. And so we can now look at the fasting or pre-meal blood sugars, the 1 hour after the beginning of any meal blood sugar, and the 2-hour blood sugars measured 2 hours after the beginning of any given meal. And by looking at those more sensitive indicators, we can actually catch a tendency to prediabetes and diabetes potentially 10 years before it would otherwise be caught, and therefore saving ourselves all kinds of medical problems like heart attacks and strokes and even cancer, like colon cancer, skin cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer. All these are cancers that are much more likely to occur in somebody with diabetes, especially if they're having to take insulin. Because the more insulin you take, okay, to overcome the insulin resistance that has developed in the body, in the muscles and in the liver, the more likely you are to promote and cause cancer to grow. Okay, so in other words, not that taking insulin is always bad, it's just that if we're just taking more insulin rather than actually addressing the cause of the problem initially, that we're actually adding potential risk of heart attacks and strokes and cancer and amputations and so forth. So, all right, now let's now go to the next slide. Points out to what is the first most important step. Okay? And actually, for the purpose of today's talk, for you, I actually used to say there was one first important step, but actually I'm adding another one because I realized as I was preparing this talk for you today that the other step that I'm going to mention in a second won't actually work very well if you're not doing this one. If you're not willing to be the chairman or the chairwoman of your own health, okay, if you're not the chairperson of the board of your own health committee, you're not going to be successful. In other words, do not wait for your primary care physician, for your cardiologist, for your diabetologist, for your nutritionist, for your spouse, for your adult child, for your neighbor, for your coworkers. Nobody can be in charge of your health other than you. Because if you're not in charge, it's not going to work. So, and if you recognize that you must be in charge, that means that you're going to start paying attention to what your options are and what is most likely to work for you. So I'm going to give you some examples of that. Now here's an example of this is the case study I want to share with you today. This is me on our right, and to my right is Mr. Tom Zappa and his daughter in the middle. I was actually at a basketball tournament at Loma Linda University Academy, and I went to the university market, and there was Tom Zappa. Now, I'm going to share with you his case study because some years before this picture was taken, he actually was the chairman of the board for a publishing company and he told his publisher, I want to have a top-notch book that we publish that demonstrates how to reverse type 2 diabetes. She had a family member that had out of control diabetes, and he wanted to really encourage and understand what to do. So he gets the first copy. By the way, it took 5 years of him harassing his publisher and his publisher harassing me in a good way to encourage this to get done. So it was a Herculean effort to actually write and organize and publish this book called Goodbye Diabetes, Preventing and Reversing Diabetes the Natural Way. I had the privilege of working with my cousin's daughter, Elise Harbolt, who is a nurse who had been hired by my publisher, who then gave her the job to harass me. So we ended up meeting for 3 hours every other night for literally an entire year, and that's how we wrote this book. I would tell her all my stories and my case studies and my experiences, and she could type faster than I could talk. And we whipped out a chapter every 2 weeks, but it took us a year to finish it. All right. So basically, I'm actually going to show for you really quickly just a 2-minute video of Tom Zapara talking about how he found out he was diabetic just prior to his 90th birthday.
You know, about 3 years ago, I read this book by Wes Youngberg, Goodbye Diabetes. And lo and behold, a year later, I'm going in to get my routine medical test. My doctor informs me that lo and behold, I was a full-blown diabetic. That just scared the liver out of me, you know. That was like a death sentence to me. I didn't say a word, and my thought was going, I've got to do something. So I had two choices. I either had to take insulin or eliminate diabetes. Just common sense tells me, isn't it better to eliminate this instead of fighting it all my life? And I determined to give that a try, praying to God to give me the resolve. I'm not praying for God to give me good health. I'm praying to God to give me the resolve so I can develop my own good health. And since then, by having a very substantial breakfast of like different berries and greens in a smoothie and a big bowl of fresh oatmeal, and I walk 6 days out of 7. And because of that, my heart medications are virtually, and cholesterol are virtually at 0 now, and I'm thinking that's probably going to be off pretty soon, off completely. I lost 40-some pounds. I have more energy, even though I'm getting older. My next goal is to get to be 100. One of my hobbies is wood turning. I'm in the process of making about 100 bowls and vessels, and I'm going to have a big party. I'm reluctant to give anybody advice because everybody really doesn't like advice. The only thing I would encourage people, educate yourself more about just standard health, about different things, and you just have to come to your own conclusion there. And I think somehow you'll evaluate your own health. I'm Tom Zapara, and I'm 91.5 years old.
Okay, so I just want to, let's see here. I'm trying to stop sharing screen for a second, but it's not letting me do that. So I'm just going to keep going here. Let me tell you really quickly the rest of the story for Tom. You know, that video was actually done 8.5 years ago. He just had his 100th birthday a couple of months ago. And I've been checking his blood sugars and his hemoglobin A1C, which is an average indicator of how high your blood sugars have been. And he's doing just as good now as he was about 6 months after he started this program, where he had completely reversed his diabetes And in doing so, he even completely reversed his pre-diabetes. Okay, so bottom line is that you can see here on the screen that his blood sugar levels were extremely high. When he came in to see me, he actually read the book. He was the chairman of the board of the publishing company, so he got a signed copy. He got the very first book that came out the press, and so he read that, and he goes like, "Wow, I need to." So he called me up, and he goes like, "Dr. Youngberg, I got to get tested right now." So we did a full 4-hour glucose tolerance test, and you see what was going on with his blood sugars. Fasting blood sugar 144. His 1 hour and 2 hour blood sugars were into high 200, 300 range. His 3 hour blood sugar was still close to 300. He had out of control diabetes, and he really didn't realize he had a problem prior to this. His hemoglobin A1C was 7.1%. It was very, very elevated. Okay, and so, by the way, the hemoglobin A1C is a test that most diabetics are familiar with, because it is measuring how much sugar or glucose has irreversibly attached itself, has glazed or caramelized or glycosylated itself to the proteins throughout the bloodstream, really proteins throughout the whole body. So it's not just an indirect measure of how high the blood sugars have been over the last 3-4 months. It is actually a pathology test. It is actually measuring how much damage is occurring in the body because of high blood sugars. It is directly measuring this glazing of sugar to proteins throughout the body that changes the way these proteins and these enzymes work, and it damages them. So the hemoglobin A1C test needs to be improved, not just to lower blood sugars for that sake, but to actually prevent the damage that it would obviously cause. Okay, so it is critical that we understand what our hemoglobin A1C is, and also understand that our average that the hemoglobin A1C is more finely tuned to the after meal blood sugar. In other words, if you can start checking your after meal blood sugars, you're going to start seeing what foods and what activities and what stress levels impact high blood sugars, so that you can more easily control those, and therefore be much more successful in lowering your fasting or lowering your hemoglobin A1C. Okay, so the key here is seeing that he, within the first 5 weeks of starting the program, and I remember he said to me when he learned that he had out of control diabetes, he slammed his fist down on the table right next to me. And he's used to being chairman of the board. He's a self-made multimillionaire that's donated more money to hospitals and educational institutions than I'll ever see. Okay, but so he's used to being in charge. He says, "What are we going to do about this?" And I said, "Tom, I'm glad you asked, because I'm going to tell you exactly how you can reverse this." And so we talked about the timing of food. We talked about that he was as a retired multimillionaire, he would eat whenever he felt like it. He wasn't necessarily gorging himself, but he was about 65 pounds overweight when we first came to see me. I never talked to him about losing weight. I never focused on weight loss. We focused on the fundamentals, okay? And weight took care of itself. And so he started eating just 2 times a day, because rather than snacking whenever he wanted food, snacking in the evening or making a sandwich whenever he was hungry, he would eat a good breakfast and then a good later afternoon meal, and that was it. No food in between meals. And what that's referred to as time restricted eating, or intermittent fasting. See, so if you train your body to eat at certain times only, especially if you're avoiding eating a lot in the evening, or try to limit your afternoon to evening eating, that dramatically helps optimize your metabolism and helps you lower your blood sugars, lower your insulin resistance, and it works extremely well. It actually extends longevity dramatically. So he stopped snacking. He started eating 2 meals a day. By the way, if you want to eat 3 meals a day, that's fine. Just eat them at regular times with about 4 or 5 hours of no food in between. Okay, but then he also learned the principle of exercising immediately after a meal. So look at what happened between May of 2013 and July of 2013. You see what happened with the fasting blood sugars? They dropped dramatically. But more important, look at what happened with the hemoglobin A1C. The hemoglobin A1C went from a significant diabetic level, 7.1, to no longer being diabetic at 6.2. So 6.5 is the beginning of diabetes. So if you're under 6.5 and you're not on medications, you simply don't have diabetes by definition. Okay? If your fasting blood sugar is under 126 consistently, and your A1C is under 6.5, you don't have diabetes anymore. So I remember him calling me up 5 weeks after he had been diagnosed, and he said, "Dr. Y, I want to get my blood sugars checked again." I go, "Like, Tom, it's only been 5 weeks." He goes, "I know, but it's my 90th birthday in a week, and I want to be able to tell everybody who's celebrating with me how I'm doing." So that's when we checked the July 15 labs, and indeed, he no longer had diabetes. So he was able to report to his extended family and his friends that he'd already reversed his diabetes. He was so excited. Well, another 2 months go by, and now his hemoglobin A1C has dropped under the pre-diabetic cutoff. It's at 5.5. Went back up in December. So, but after August 2014, basically a year after he started this program, and he was walking after meals, he was eating appropriately and not snacking, he never went back into a pre-diabetic mode. So look what happened. June 2015, at the lower middle of the slide, hemoglobin A1C 5.1. That's better than most college students. Okay, and so since 2013, he has been in a optimal blood sugar level the entire time. And he just turned 100, and he never got his diabetes back. Why? Because he continued to eat healthfully and exercise after a meal. Now let me tell you a little bit about exercising after a meal. Okay, and so you see here this father and child are going for a little walk. The most important lifestyle strategy to improve blood sugars and reverse diabetes or pre-diabetes is to initiate a walking program that begins immediately after finishing every meal. Okay? Now, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to exercise then. I want to exercise either just first thing in the morning, or I want to exercise a couple hours after my meal. And let me say, exercise at any time is good for you. Okay, but you need to understand the metabolism and the consequences of choosing different times after the meal in terms of optimizing your healing, how rapidly you can heal from diabetes and pre-diabetes. So here, the first step to understand is that when you eat, your blood sugars start to go up immediately. and they keep going up for an hour or more. If you wait to exercise until an hour and a half after the meal, your blood sugars have already gone up as high as they're ever going to go after that meal. And so you have missed the opportunity to stop the rise of blood sugar and to blunt that, to basically to lessen the curve, right? So you can dramatically lessen the amount of blood sugars that your body has to deal with by just exercising immediately after you finish your meal. Not 15 minutes later, not half an hour later. As soon as you finish that last bite, go for a walk. Now, if you can't go outside for a walk for whatever reason, okay, and you need to stay inside, do something inside. If you have a bad knee or a bad hip or a bad ankle and you can't walk at all, okay, then just stay in your chair like this, and then you can see me maybe on the screen. You just use your arms up and down, just like you're reaching up for something in the cabinets above you. Just keep going up and down with your right and your left arm. That is an exceptionally good exercise that can help lower your blood sugars right after a meal. So any equivalent to going for a mild to moderate walk, okay, you could sweep, you could vacuum, anything that moves your body is going to be good for lowering your blood sugars. Now, here's the important thing, okay? The important thing, this is why I recommend that you do some testing. If you can't get your doctor to do some of these tests, glucose tolerance test, vitamin D test, omega-3, EPA, DHA test, etc., hemoglobin A1C, order them yourself. You can go online and go to ultralabtest.com. You can order whatever test you want. Any test your doctor can order, you can order online on your own without anybody telling you can or can't have that test. Now, you'd have to pay out of pocket for it, but these are significantly discounted tests. So I encourage everybody when I'm doing talks at their organizations, if you can't get your doctor to do those tests, do them yourself. Remember, you are the chairperson of your healthcare board, nobody else. So don't let somebody tell you you can't have a test because you can order it yourself if you want it. Okay, so get tested. Now, I'm hoping that those that have organized me speaking to you at this church today have this handout that they can pass out. It's just a 2-page handout that talks about testing blood sugars to optimize your success. And in this handout, as you can see here, it has the 10 stages, the expanded 10 stages of high blood sugars. In other words, the first 5 stages are working up to diabetes. The next 5 stages are dealing with advanced stages of diabetes. And so if you look at the left-hand column of this, you can see that there is that you have a fasting blood sugar stages, you have 1 hour blood sugar stages, 2 hour blood sugar stages. That's 1 or 2 hours after the beginning of your meal. Okay, and then you have the hemoglobin A1C, average blood sugar stages. So you can use this to kind of gauge for yourself, where am I on this continuum of optimal blood sugars all the way to critically out of control advanced diabetic blood sugars. Okay, so blood sugars are one of many indicators that tell us, what our risk is for a heart attack, a stroke, a nerve damage, kidney failure, amputation risk, Alzheimer's risk, etc. Even cancer risk. All these things are dramatically increased by elevated blood sugars that could easily be improved dramatically by just paying attention to these strategies. I I'm currently working with an individual at another church that I'm doing some health lectures for. It's a gentleman who had blood sugars above 350. In fact, after eating, they were above 450. He never checked his blood sugars after eating before. He had no idea his blood sugars went that high. And so he told me just a week into doing exercise after meals, paying more attention to what he's eating, he is seeing about 150-point improvement in his blood sugars already. That's without any medication. Okay, so this is very, very possible. Now, so you have that information in front of you. Now, let me really quickly go through with you this handout. Okay, and I'm just going to read this because this is a quick summary of what I've written in that handout that you should have available to you. So first of all, you don't change anything about your diet or exercise, and just check your blood sugars before and after meals for 2 days. So start checking before, 1 and 2 hours after the start of each meal. Now, there's 2 ways you can do this. The simplest, well, the most the preferred method is if you can get your primary care physician, if you have diabetes, to write you a prescription for a continuous glucose monitor, like a Freestyle Libre or one of the other monitors. You just basically get this little kit with a little sensor tab that you just attach to the back of your shoulder, and that tab just stays there like a Band-Aid for 2 weeks. And you can measure your blood sugar at any time without pricking your finger. So that's very convenient. It's the most convenient way to do this. Now, if you're not taking insulin once or twice a day, you might not meet the insurance criteria for having it covered by your insurance. But you can still get a prescription from your doctor that you could just get that for yourself. Even if you only use it for 2 weeks, which will not be that expensive, it will help you understand what's going on with your blood sugars, and more importantly, what are the things that cause your blood sugars to go up or down the quickest. Okay, so you can always do it with a blood sugar, regular blood sugar testing kit that you can just buy for yourself without a prescription from any pharmacy in the country. Okay, and so one tip on checking your blood sugars: do not prick the very tips of your blood sugar, of your fingers. That's where all the nerve endings are. So that's going to be irritating. Okay, check, do the poke on the side of your fingers, the side of the finger where the fingerprint is. There's much less nerve endings there. And then you have extra fingers if you do the sides of your fingers. So anyways, so now continue to eat your meals the way you always have, okay? And see what happens to your blood sugars. See what's going on with your blood sugars during normal eating, okay? Now, you want to document everything that you're doing, just with simple outline of a little journal. Okay, keep a record by writing down a few words that will remind you of what you had eaten. Okay, and even include party meals just to see their impact after the meal. So if you occasionally indulge in a certain meal or dessert, eat it and see what happens to your blood sugars, but just document. This is what happens when you eat that food, and that'll help give you more clarity about what you need to do to improve your health. Okay, now, so it's important to understand that it's the after meal blood sugars that spike and increase your hemoglobin A1C. Okay, so, and then that's what promotes excessive insulin release that wears out your pancreas, and that's what increases your risk for cancer, heart disease, autoimmunity, dementia, etc. So be aware of that. Then after a couple days of just seeing how you're doing at baseline, then continue to check your blood sugars, but include light to moderate after meal exercise, but without changing your diet. Just keep eating what you're normally eating. I want you to actually experience the impact of exercising light to moderately immediately after every meal, okay, it'll revolutionize, it'll help you realize how important exercise really is. And the other thing is that exercise is so good for you that it'll make you feel so much better. Remember, we're not talking about hard exercise here. We're just talking about light to moderate walk or its equivalent. Okay, and that will make you feel so much better that now you'll be more able to choose healthy foods and not to as easily give in to unhealthy foods. Okay, so it's important to pay attention that with every minute that you do moderate exercise immediately after eating, your blood sugars are now an hour or two later going to be down 1 to 3 points. Again, for every minute that you exercise, your blood sugars are now going to be lower by 1 to 3 points at 1 and 2 hours. If you don't believe me, check it for yourself, right? In fact, yeah, don't believe me. The whole point is to check it for yourself, right? Because you'll be amazed at the power of exercise right after a meal. Now, that's not the only type of exercise that's good for you. That's just a way to prevent the blood sugars from shooting up so high. Okay, and that improves digestion. It helps you. It clears the brain. It's just good for you overall. But you also want to be doing some more intensive exercise, somewhat hard exercise. You know, that perspiration type of exercise, at least 4 or 5 times a week rather. That's for 20 to 30 minutes. And that's not right after eating. That's at some other time that you can get a little bit more exercise out of it. That's also going to help lower your blood sugars. And then do something that strengthens your muscles, whether it's going to the gym or doing some calisthenics, some sit-down squats, etc. All those can be very helpful. All right. Now, so note the difference that exercise brings you, and then optimize your diet. Okay, and check to see now by adding exercise and dietary change, where you're making better choices by experiencing what foods give you the best blood sugars. That's the whole point here. You're not just guessing; you're actually seeing the impact on your own body. Okay, so anyways, go through the handout and you'll see that if you're on medications, if you're on insulin in particular, you need to have a plan with your doctor to start cutting back on your insulin and other diabetic medications. Because if you don't, you could end up in the ER with very low blood sugars. And that's far more dangerous than having a high blood sugar. So if you start applying these principles, that's the whole point. One of the reasons for checking your blood sugars is that you can start seeing your blood sugars that are now maybe starting to get a little too low. Okay, and that means that you need to start cutting back on your medications. And remember, who's in charge? You're in charge. If you keep taking the same amount of medication while your blood sugars are getting too low, whose fault is that, right? You can actually be cited for driving under the influence, even though you don't drink at all. You can be cited for driving under the influence if you're taking insulin and you let your blood sugars get too low. That might sound unfair, but of course, if your blood sugars are super low, you're just as likely to cause an accident or run into somebody as if you were drunk. So make sure you don't let your blood sugars get low. And of course, that's the exciting thing about this, is that this works so well that you have to start cutting back on your medications, which means you're starting to reverse your condition. Okay, so you can get a lot more information about this by looking at the book Goodbye Diabetes. Now, in this book, I outlined we have chapters on defining diabetes, debunking diabetes. In other words, yes, diabetes is genetically related, but that doesn't mean you can't reverse it. Everything's genetic, right? But we can undo the negative effects or the mutations by just focusing on the fundamentals. And then And then we have a whole section, how do we defeat diabetes? Now, I'm going to share with you a couple strategies from a dietary standpoint. I've mentioned some already to you, but we call it the plate method. Okay, where the key here is to make sure that at least half of your plate, at least half of the food that you're consuming at most meals is non-starchy vegetables. The green vegetables, the colorful vegetables. I actually eat a stir-fried vegetable dish every morning along with my other breakfast food. I love it. That's my favorite part of breakfast now. I never thought that I would like that, okay, but I actually do. It's wonderful. We basically will saute some onions and mushrooms and finely chopped purple cabbage and then baby spinach, and then we'll just stir fry that in its own juices. You don't need to add any oil even. And of course that stir fries down to almost nothing. So you can have a whole bunch in the pan and then add a slice of avocado or two. And boy, you got a really good non-starchy veggie dish that is full of nutrition that helps heal your body, but there's very few calories in it. Okay, and then you have a little bit of healthy carbohydrate, and then preferably like a healthy legume, beans, peas, or lentils, which are super healthy, high protein foods, but they're the type of starch that doesn't increase your blood sugars as much. Okay, in fact, it's been said that a cup of beans will, like black beans or chili, will lower your blood sugars not only for that meal, but for the next meal and the meal after that, because it has such a balancing effect on your blood sugars. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of other videos that I've done that go into this in more detail, but I just want you to understand that tip. The other thing is that you need to be eating a lot of whole plant-based foods. In other words, you want your diet to be plant strong. You want to be getting lots of plant-based whole foods in your diet. It's the colors that represent the pigments, the actual pigments of fruits and vegetables that actually change the way your genes work. Did you know that? They actually modify how your genes activate, and they improve your health through that. So when you look at colorful fruits and vegetables, you want to consume those as ways to improve your health, epigenetically speaking. And so, as you can see, they're pretty much at the top of the list of what we call the exposome. That is everything in our lives that influence our health. Everything that we do, everything that we eat, everything that we drink, everything that we say, everything that we think has a profound effect on changing the expression of our genes for good or bad. So that's why we have to include all these things in our evaluation of our personal health and how we can overcome lifestyle-related diseases. Okay, now here's another quick example of just because something says it's whole grain doesn't mean it's good for you. Okay, now, and I would challenge you is that even though, so you see here all the way at the bottom left of this slide, you have puffed whole grains, like puffed wheat or puffed rice or puffed millet as a picture to the right, lower right. So puffed grains, even though they're whole grains, actually are the lowest quality grains for your health. Okay, and as you go up this hierarchy, you'll see that there's a couple red lines. And so even shredded whole grains, like shredded wheat, wow, everybody thinks, well, that can't be bad. Well, but it's basically, it breaks down too quickly and it shoots blood sugars up quickly. And so the first red line is at minimum, if we're using a whole grain, we want to make sure that it's rolled whole grains or broken whole grains. Okay, but ideally it should be intact whole grains like kamut berries or quinoa or brown rice or barley or oat groats. Now, Even then, at this top end of the hierarchy, how do we know that that is actually okay for us to eat certain amounts of intact whole grains? The only way you're going to know if you're diabetic is by checking your blood sugars 1 or 2 hours after the beginning of that meal. That'll make you keenly aware of what amount of intact whole grains your body can handle at that given time. As you become healthier, more metabolically strong, you'll be able to eat more of those healthy foods. But even healthy intact whole grains need to be moderated if we're to optimize our blood sugars in many cases. So this is an example of what we need to do. Now, what I want to spend a few minutes with you discussing today is the importance of recognizing that there are hidden culprits that impact our diabetes. It's not just what we eat. It's not just exercise or the lack thereof. There's oftentimes other things that dramatically impact the damage that occurs to our pancreas and therefore higher blood sugars. And so I'm very careful with my patients to make sure that we're evaluating this, and I want you to be aware of this. So as you see the quote, the anonymous quote at the bottom of the screen, it says, "What you don't know can kill you." In other words, there are some factors that many people aren't aware of that are influencing their blood sugars or influencing their disease process. And unless you know what it is, you can't fix it. So here's an example. There are countless studies. Okay, and this was a study published in 2015 in the journal Biomed Research International, documenting that. And I'll read in bold in the abstract. It says, focusing on the 24 studies in which the diagnosis of diabetes was confirmed using laboratory tests for medical records, we found that the summary relative risk, okay, of how arsenic impacted the risk of developing diabetes was 1.71. In other words, people who had been exposed to higher levels of arsenic because they ate a lot of rice. Unfortunately, rice typically is high in arsenic. And it could be the water supply. It could be other sources as well. That if you're exposed to more arsenic, which is a common problem even in America, we're 71% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes. Why is that? Okay, because arsenic damages the pancreas's ability to make insulin. And that is going to cause diabetes. Okay, so there's no question that toxins increase the risk for developing diabetes. Now, you want to remember and consider the fact that anything that's bad for your pancreas that leads to diabetes is probably also going to be bad for your brain, leading to Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. Okay, so here's a study published in Cell Metabolism in 2021 entitled SARS-CoV-2 Infects Human Pancreatic Beta Cells, okay, and elicits beta cell impairment. Now that's just a nice, way of saying it kills pancreatic cells. Okay, so reading back into bold and the abstract again, pancreatic beta cells can be infected by SARS, by basically COVID, and cause beta cell depletion, a nice word for damage and destruction. Okay, so COVID, basic infections causes damage to pancreatic insulin levels and secretion, and it does this by inducing death and destruction. That's what apoptosis means, death and destruction of the beta cells. And then they finally actually say it the way most of us would understand, is that COVID can directly kill pancreatic insulin producing cells. All right, now, so basically this is the point I'm making here is that any infection, not just COVID, but any infection is really bad for our health. And so that's why we have to initiate the earliest treatment possible for any infection. What happened in the last 3 years with COVID was a public health travesty. Okay, the public health authorities, and I'm a public health doctor, so I was part of the problem. Okay, we should have never said, go home and wait it out. And if you get sick enough that you can't breathe, then you go to the hospital. And even in the hospital, they didn't treat it properly. So any infection can be treated very effectively immediately upon the first sign of exposure or infection. That's the main message that you want to understand. If you have diabetes or really any chronic disease, we know that you're at much higher risk of succumbing to that infection, whether it's a virus or a bacteria or pneumonia. You're much more likely to die from that bacteria or pneumonia if you're a diabetic, okay, than if you're not a diabetic. Okay, and so that's why everybody who gets infected should immediately get that treated rapidly. I'm going to show you today what the most important things you can do, treatment at home. Things that you can do on your own at home naturally are by far the most effective strategies. Okay, now this also, as I pointed out earlier, relates to the fact that diabetes, okay, is caused by infections and toxins that damage the pancreas that actually stimulate the production of pancreatic amyloid. Now, if you know anything about Alzheimer's, you will recognize immediately that this is the language that is used to describe Alzheimer's. That Alzheimer's developed because of amyloid plaques developing in the brain. In other words, infections of any kinds and toxins of any kind lead to not only diabetes of the pancreas, but Alzheimer's of the brain as well. It's the same pathologic process. And so that's why we have to treat infections right away, because otherwise the pancreas makes amyloid to help fight the infection. It's actually part of the immune system. Okay, or the brain makes beta amyloid to fight the infection. So the brain is trying to fix the problem because we haven't used other natural means to fix the problem early enough. Okay, so this it's basically there's no question. All kinds of studies have shown that COVID-19 infections can generate diabetes. Okay, there's all kinds of mechanisms so that they're saying that 1 out of 20 new cases of diabetes actually strongly associated with COVID. But it's also associated with the COVID vaccine. That's really important to understand this. Now, this isn't an anti-vaccination talk. This is basically helping us understand that now we recognize, now after the fact, we recognize that the COVID vaccine and its boosters actually increase risk for diabetes, actually increase risk for Alzheimer's, because it's stimulating the production of a spike protein that is toxic to the pancreas and toxic to the brain and really toxic to the heart and everything else. And so there's all kinds of studies that I can share with you here. So if you're interested in this topic, I did a 7-part series that's on Rumble, a very popular video platform, okay, that is called The Rise of Immune Deficiency, Diabetes, Dementia, Blood Clots, Autoimmunity, After COVID Infection, and After COVID Vaccine. So if you're interested in that topic, I have all the studies to document that information, as well as the treatment outline. What do we do about it after the fact? So bottom line is as we're getting into what do we do about this, here's a quote from Herbert Hoover, one of our past presidents, who said, "Wisdom consists not so much in knowing what to do in the ultimate as in knowing what to do next." So what do we do now, right? What do we do now? We already have diabetes. We already have been exposed to COVID. We've already been exposed to the COVID vaccine. What do we do now? By the way, the world's leading vaccinologists, Dr. Paul Offit, OFFIT, who is on the FDA advisory panel, who, yes, did promote the vaccine all the way through. He is now on record as of last week saying he did not get the booster last year and he's not doing it this year. He's concerned. He's basically one of the world's most recognized immunologists, virologists, and vaccinologists. So this isn't just my idea. I'm looking at the experts and saying, hey, we got a problem here. What do we do about this? We need to protect ourselves from things that are causing ongoing damage. Okay, so basically, two of my favorite clinicians and researchers, Dr. Paul Merrick and Dr. Teresa Laurie, they recently published a amazing paper in the journal Microorganisms in May of 2023 called Strategies for the Management of Spike Protein Related Pathology, both from people who had COVID and are still having symptoms because of that, but also from people who had the COVID vaccine and are still having symptoms because of that. Okay, so anyways, here are a kind of a summary list of things that we want to be considering if we want to help the body get rid of this spike protein that either comes from having the infection, okay, or from a problem with the vaccine. So first of all, we have to reverse metabolic disorders, which of course is the topic today. That reversing diabetes and prediabetes isn't just, oh, that's good, I don't have that problem anymore. It's an imperative strategy to protect ourselves from the ongoing damage from infections. Because these infections have depressed our immune system, and now we're at more risk of cancer, we're at higher risk of autoimmunity, we're at higher risk of blood clots, we're at higher risk for everything. And so we want to make sure we're following the fundamentals to reverse the diabetes and prediabetes as much as we can. Number two, obviously optimize blood sugars, weight, insulin levels, triglycerides, blood pressure, etc. Three, eat whole plant-based diet, a plant-strong diet, more plants. If plants are loaded with the antidotes to the problem. Okay, so avoid fast foods, avoid refined foods and processed grains. We already talked about intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating. When we do that, that actually stimulates the body to kill cells that are infected with the COVID virus and the spike protein. And it gets rid of them, and it helps us be healthier. It helps us overcome the damage from that. Okay, exercising daily, as we already talked about. Doing sauna, in Finland. I've spoken in Finland in the past, and there are more saunas in Finland than there are homes. People love their saunas, and so basically take advantage of sauna. Sweating is the point. When you sweat, you get rid of toxins. You improve your body's ability to heal. And then consider hydrotherapy. If you don't know much about that, there's all kinds of information on YouTube, on Rumble, and other sites. On my website, dryoungberg.com, you can see information on how to optimize your immune system, in part by doing hot and cold water therapies to stimulate your innate immune system to overcome the damage that's being caused by the spike protein. So you can do those things. And I won't spend a lot of time on this because you can watch my other videos that deal with this. But if you're concerned about how spike protein might be damaging your body, make sure you're on a good probiotic that has bifidobacteria in it. Okay, because spike protein kills bifidobacteria, oftentimes down to zero. And you need to restore healthy probiotics. You might need some prebiotics, and there's various options for prebiotics. Vitamin D, my average patient needs at least 5,000 up to 10,000 units of vitamin D3 every day. How do you know you need that? You got to test your vitamin D levels. If you're not supplementing vitamin D, I can pretty much guarantee that at least 95% of you are frankly low in vitamin D. Okay, so vitamin D, real quick. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. Zinc is critical. Okay, we've been hearing about the risk of Ebola and Marburg virus being one of the next big pandemics that hit the world. Well, if that happens, and I hope that doesn't happen, but if it were to happen, this protocol here would be critical, because zinc and vitamin C and curcumin and N-acetylcysteine would be powerful natural ingredients, simple remedies to help limit the risk of Ebola or Marburg virus from taking hold. Okay, so pay attention to these strategies. They're very, very important. If you have been exposed or you're actually experiencing a respiratory infection, at that point, you can't just use a maintenance dose. You have to use a higher dose. So with vitamin D, especially for those of you that have not been supplementing the vitamin D previously, okay, you need to take more, like 50,000 units every day for 5 days. Now, you might think that's a crazy, way too much amount. It's not. I've been studying vitamin D regularly for over 20 years now, and this is actually the protocol you'd want to follow. Okay, so it's very, very important, especially if you haven't been taking it. There's all kinds of studies documenting this to be very critical. Nattokinase, bromelain are two enzymes that, when taken on an empty stomach, will actually destroy spike protein, regardless of where it comes from, and basically neutralize it. So I'm actually on this entire protocol myself, okay, because it actually helps clean up the body and helps you get rid of the infective elements of viruses and also their toxins. Okay, then we have other things for early treatment of respiratory infections. This is kind of my list that I use at home, that I recommend to all my patients. Biocidin TS throat spray. I'm going to put a handout together that I'm going to give out to the leaders of today's talk there at the Sharon Seventh-day Adventist Church. That will have a little bit more explanation on this if you want more information on that. But I believe that everybody should get a nebulizer. Everybody should get a nebulizer, that like a little handheld, portable, battery-operated nebulizer where you can nebulize iodine. Okay, and that'll be in the handout as well. Okay, so there's all kinds of studies documenting this. We don't have time to go over those today. Those are in the other videos that I mentioned earlier on rumble.com. Okay, so nattokinase works, why vitamin C is so important. Bottom line with vitamin C is, you know that almost 99% of all mammals can make all the vitamin C they want from converting glucose into vitamin C. They have the enzyme that makes vitamin C. We don't. Okay, and those animals that are roughly our size make anywhere between 2,000 and 4,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. So that's what I tell my patients. You should work up to taking that much vitamin C every day as a protection of what the body normally would have done if we had that enzyme that could actually make vitamin C when needed. Okay, now, last thing I want to share with you is the value of iodine. Again, this will be in the handout that I'm going to make available. Okay, there's a whole video that talks just about how to use iodine. But this is at the very beginning of the pandemic, I was promoting it because, well, I've been doing this for a long time because I understand this from a functional medicine standpoint. But then researchers started to document and prove that COVID could be largely contained and obliterated if you used iodine properly after first exposure or symptom of the infection. And so that is discussed in the videos I've done already. Okay, but these are the different types of iodine you want. So I just want to share with you that everybody can buy povidone iodine, 10% povidone at any grocery store or pharmacy, anywhere in the country, and then you can dilute it using the protocol I have here on the slide, which will also be in the handout, where you just take a fourth of a teaspoon of 10% povidone iodine, like betadine, and add it to an ounce of water, and you can use that as a spray up the nose. More importantly, you can use it as a mouthwash or gargle. If you have a sore throat or you have a respiratory infection, you can gargle with that 4 times a day. It does amazing things for you. Okay, so take advantage of that. So everybody should have the povidone iodine, but you don't swallow that. That's not to be nebulized. That's not to be used internally like the other forms of iodine, which are nutritional forms. But you can use a nebulizer to nebulize the nutritional forms of iodine as per the handout. So finally, on vitamin D, we've already talked about this. There's all kinds of studies showing that this is powerfully impactful, that dramatically lowers the risk of death associated with COVID. Let me say this. Winston Churchill said it best when he quoted, "Men stumble over the truth from time to time, but most pick themselves up and hurry off as if nothing happened." I hope that some of the things that I shared with you today will ring true, but that you actually put them into practice. Don't hurry off and then forget all about it. If you put these principles into practice, I can promise you it'll dramatically improve your health in a substantial way. So the quick overview is that while the majority of us in this country have prediabetes or diabetes, the majority of us can actually undo this condition. We can reverse it. There are steps involved in this process, which involve being in charge of our own health and testing our blood sugars. That's really critical. It's important when we eat and when we exercise, as we pointed out, and make sure that you treat all infections early on and aggressively with the natural approaches that we outlined today. And with that, I encourage you to be chairpersons of your own board of health, and in doing so, dramatically improve your health. Okay, so with that, I will sign off. Okay, and I know that there's individuals there, right there locally at the Sharon Church that will help answer questions about this. God bless. It is good for me to be with you today. In fact, I feel pretty much at home, not only in the fact that I'm in my
How many of you enjoyed that presentation? Yeah, so there is classes that Dr. Youngberg offers. You noticed that on the bottom of the screen it said Diabetes Undone. So I don't know if we'll be able to do that or not, but it's sort of like the Dave Ramsey class. You would have to purchase a workbook and come to class once a week. But that might be an option we might want to do at some point. I don't know. Carrie, did you want to?
Well, 2 things. First, I'm going to collect the cards. So if you wrote any questions out, move those toward the center aisle, and I'll come down and collect the cards. But before, and the second thing that I want to do, can everyone who's on the Health Ministries team please stand up? Because I can tell you, this didn't happen because someone woke up today and said, oh, let's put on a seminar about diabetes. There was a lot of planning and a lot of work that went into this. And actually, it was the brainchild of April. The Lord, I guess, put a burden on her heart to bring this to us. So I thank everyone who worked in the kitchen, everyone who was in our meetings planning. The Lord has used this Health Ministries team to bring God's message to Sharon. So thank you, everyone on the Health Ministries team.
All right, thank you. While they're picking up the cards, I've told some of you about it. Our next significant seminar is coming up, and it's going to be on February 28th. That's a Wednesday, a weekday, and it's going to be at 7 o'clock. And Michael Greger is coming to town, who is world famous. He's recently produced a book called How Not to Age. I'd like to see that book, right? I don't want to age anymore. Anyway, he's coming. But to come to this seminar, you're going to have to go to eventbrite.com, and then you look in the search bar and just put How Not to Age or Michael Greger, and it'll pop up. And there's a fee to come, and that's going to pay for his services, his flight, his hotel. Anyway, I think it's $17 a ticket only. So please fill that out. We want to have 300 people here that night for him. Thank you so much.
One more thing for Carrie to do, actually, maybe. Is anybody still, did everybody get a ticket to win the